Good evening and welcome to the Housing and Economic Development Committee. I'm James Torrance, Chair of the committee and representative of the 7th Council District. I'm joined today by committee members Vice Chair Odette Ramos of the 14th District, Councilman Jermaine Jones of the 12th District, Antonio Glover of the 13th District, Zach Blanchard of the 11th District. I'm also joined by representatives of the Mayor's Office, Isaiah Griffin, committee staff from the Office of Council Services, Tony Leva. Today, the committee will be meeting to discuss LO 25029, whole block strategy and disposition timeline. But also for LO 25032, we're going to postpone that to another day, which is the Baltimore Reinvestment Initiative Council Oversight. We want to have a discussion with a briefing from the state. We also have in attendance representatives from the city agencies outside of the organizations included, We have a representation from the Department of Housing and Community Development with Commissioner Alice Kennedy. With that being said, we will start with our first agency report, which will be Commissioner Kennedy representing the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Good afternoon, Chair Torrance, members of the committee, and council members. Happy to be here today to go over whole block strategy and disposition timelines related to Oversight 250029. I'm joined with me today by Deputy Commissioner Wendy Redfern, as well as Chief of Strategic Communications Tammy Hawley and Jason Wright, our legislative liaison. A number of our staff members actually this evening are in Carrollton Ridge for a planning meeting around vacant property reduction. So you have us for tonight, and if there's anything, we'll have to get back to you as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna ground ourselves again in Reframe Baltimore, and Reframe Baltimore is the mayor's comprehensive strategy to eliminate vacant properties in the city of Baltimore in 15 years with a $15 billion, 15 years, $3 billion strategy. And this work includes all of the work that has been put together going back to the comprehensive framework for development. And the Reframe Baltimore strategy is what guides the work of DHCD and the work of a number of our partners that we work with as well in terms of being able to eliminate vacant properties across the city. One of the key things that we focus on is not just the elimination of vacant properties, but it is creating whole block outcomes, which also is creating whole neighborhood outcomes as well. This is not just about one property, whether or not it is a vacant property or a vacant lot. This is about creating opportunities and addressing not just the vacant properties, not just the vacant lots, but also legacy homeowners, also renters on that block, landlord properties, et cetera, in terms of what is needed to bring that block back into productive use, as well as creating that whole block outcome. So a reminder too, we define whole block by two sides of the street from corner to corner. So we are actually undergoing our fiscal year 27 block level planning. We've talked about this before in terms of the different blocks that we do in neighborhoods in the vacant reduction priority geographies, and drill down into that parcel level work. Block level planning kicks off actually the first week of March. We will have, and this is where everybody in terms of staff from DHCD as well as the planning department and are in rooms doing that block level planning. We're also working on cross-agency coordination regarding large site demolitions and redevelopment. I know this is something, Mr. Chair, that we've talked about also specifically as it relates to Gilmore and the work that's happening there as well. Also just want to ground ourselves in a reminder of where we are today. So as of today, we are at 12,010 vacant buildings in the city of Baltimore. We continue to see that number drive down. We continue to see an over 25% reduction since Mayor Scott took office, and we continue to see positive outcomes from the work that a number of the council members with your communities are doing in partnership with DHCD, or that we do in partnership with the communities. So one of the questions that had come up and that we wanted to talk with you today about was the disposition in terms of developer goals, program requirements, et cetera. So, we have made significant shifts over the last several years in terms of how we engage with and work with development partners and development partnerships. There's a couple different things along those lines. One was fixed pricing to kind of work through a number of different opportunities. The other is a commitment that we've made to work with our communities ahead of time in terms of, let's say that there is a large site RFP, to do that work, to kind of think about what the use is going to be for that property, and like really looking at which development partners are able to show up to meet the requirements of what the community wants for that use. And as well, we've done things like putting out the developer RFQ, which was specifically looking at a set of developers in certain neighborhoods that we started with, kind of piloting this process for the developer RFQ for Broadway East, East Baltimore Midway, Coldstream Homestead Montebello, as well as the Southwest Partnership catchment area, geographic area as well. And we did this for not only developers that can renovate vacant properties, but we also had people respond for persons that, and development teams that could do new construction as well on vacant lots to help us fill in and move through those. We did that work in partnership with the community. So this was also working with communities to review who had responded to those RFQs, be able to ask questions and kind of be able to see who the community wants to see doing work in their neighborhoods. Some of those people that responded are residents of the neighborhoods. They are people that live in our neighborhoods. We are talking about a significant number of development partners that we see across the city that are doing this work, that are smaller developers, emerging developers, are smaller minority women-owned development teams, minority development teams that are showing up to take on the work that they can take on, right? So if they can do 2 properties at a time, we want to support them to do 2 properties at a time. The ones that can do 15 at a time, we want to support for them to do 15 at a time. And that's where the financial capacity component definitely comes into play, especially for larger projects, as well as really for larger projects as it relates to the new infill construction components, because that is a beast in of itself with a lot of different moving parts and a different kind of process that needs to be in place than just renovation of vacant properties across the board. So in terms of some of the work that we are continuing to do is growing that partner integration with communities and making sure that those development partners have an understanding that we are asking of them and the community is asking of them to not just focus on just what they're building and the addresses that they're building, but to really be a part of the community, to show up at community meetings. How can they help and assist other residents on their block? We've had some successful examples of development partners that have been able to show up and help. Yeah. Okay. Didgeridoo. That's the, okay, I think we're good. All right. So we want to make sure that we have partners that are engaged with the community, showing up for the community. We've had really good examples of historic examples of development partners that have been able to step in to help existing residents with home repairs. You know, the way that home repair grants work, the city does not have a contractor to do home repairs. We actually, the homeowner chooses the contractor. And then we pay the bill and the homeowner has to sign off on it. We've had some good examples where developers or contractors working on blocks were able to engage with homeowners, and the homeowner felt comfortable having them do some windows or exterior upgrades to help their property actually kind of mesh in with the new developed properties as well, to realize not just kind of aesthetic improvements, but also help them realize being able to age in place or stay in their property and realize increased equity and helping to, you know, produce generational wealth. We do have also, and are looking at the Developer Academy. This is one of the items that is also outlined and mentioned in Mayor Scott's Be More Fast initiative, looking how to have the Development Academy be able to kind of ensure that we're able to support the smaller and medium developers, to have them not only better integrate with DHCD, understanding city processes, but also helping provide technical assistance and training on some of their finance readiness that needs to happen, and some of the basic tools that are needed to understand everything from zoning, you know, to water hookups, meter, how to work with BGE, different things along those lines. What are some of the tips? What are some of the tools that can make their job easier, and to also be integrated also as well within the communities. We also have more project finance developer support options with the affordable housing tax increment financing and other programs that we're looking at to layer with other project fund sources as well. So we've had successful developer incentive programs and the work of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. All of that comes into play in terms of how to best support these projects, whether or not rehab of vacant properties or new construction on vacant lots, to be able to achieve the whole block outcomes. I do want to highlight that Deputy Commissioner Redford hired a new Assistant Commissioner for Project Finance, Mr. Shavosky Buffalo is the person filling that role, comes with a significant amount of experience in the project finance world for housing, and has, you know, hit the ground running in ways to support not just the team, but also to start, you know, thinking about other ways that we can expand the programs already underway, add to different programs, or to think about that project finance partnerships that we need to do. Wanted to go into some of the disposition process and data that was coming up, and kind of talk a little bit through this too. So one of the key things, one of the questions and things that had come up was really looking at some of the items that are requirements for applications, or for applications for properties and requirements, you know, that need to be met. So one of the key ones we talk about is the fixed pricing program, and that initial kind of requirement, you have to have proof of $90,000, whether or not that is cash on hand, that could be a rehab mortgage, it could be a line of credit, background check, good standing. We also look at if you have any existing inventory of vacant buildings, and is there an existing development strategy and financing in place? Are you actively working on those vacant buildings? Do you have more coming in? Like, what does that look like, and how are we working with you on that? In terms of competitive offering requirements for an RFQ or an RFP or an EOI, some of those are tied to larger projects or larger bundles of programs. We look at not only just your proposal, but your full development budget, sources and uses, experience of your development team, End use is a big one to make sure that it complies with what the desire is of the community. Prior work examples, as well as different levels of financing commitment that you have and what financing options you're going with. We also have two different types of land disposition agreements. So there is a specific land disposition agreement that is specific to the fixed pricing program. And then all of our LDAs are fixed templates approved by the BOE. So we don't have multiple different versions of an LDA. It is a fixed template. We fill in the very specific information that is property specific as well as buyer specific information. And then there are very limited places where we can modify those terms and language, and we choose which LDA best fits the transaction that we have in front of us. So I think that is also something that has been a misconception for a number of years, but we have had LDA templates in place for a number of years now. And that also helps just move things along a little bit faster, because it's not like we're needing to create new documents every single time we go to sell a property. So we wanted to talk about the disposition process and the review. So one of the key things is, even with fixed pricing, if you submit an application, it doesn't automatically mean that you're awarded that property. So there is still a level of application review, there's a level of due diligence that needs to happen, and depending upon whether or not it's fixed pricing, or let's say a larger RFP or RFQ or EOI associated with it, that application review and award can change or fluctuate in terms of the time that it takes to do that. We also have our real estate agent kind of operations, the review. So that comes into play in terms of we're reviewing for the background check that we mentioned earlier, making sure that you're in good standing, having that proof of funds, and then working on the LDA preparation, making sure that they're using which template for that LDA that needs to be done. If it is a more complex project, this is where there are a significant number of terms that are negotiated, and those more complex projects can take some back and forth on negotiating those terms. The developers have to sign the LDAs. Sometimes some of the timing, even what we've seen for some of the fixed price LDAs, developers could take their time to get back some of the signed documents on that. They also, depending upon which developer it is, if it's one of the new ones, they're having their legal teams review things, which can take some time as well. So we try to work through those, but there are external tasks that are outside of DHCD that can impact some of the timing that it takes. Another key thing when we get to the settlement box, I'll mention that when we get there. So we also have real estate committee that comes in. So for all transfers, leases, all of the dispositions except for the fixed pricing also are submitted to the real estate committee. Real estate committee includes a representative from the mayor's office, representative from the comptroller, a representative from city council, also representative from Office of Real Estate, and DHCD, DGS also participates in real estate committee. And once it goes through real estate committee, then we also then can move on to the Board of Estimates. So all LDAs have to go through the Board of Estimates to make sure that everything's signed, move forward, and then get that on the next BOE schedule after real estate committee. We have worked, and I think the meeting, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, you met with Scott in real estate committee just to talk to, yeah. So as recently as 2 weeks ago, meeting with staff and members of the comptroller's office to kind of also make sure that we're achieving all of the efficiencies that we can as it relates to real estate committee, and making sure that that submission process, review process is also running well and correctly. So the other piece is settlement. So this is another one where external factors really are at play here. Our goal is to have settlement within 90 days of the Board of Estimates, and we don't dictate when that settlement is. Settlement is up to the developer. They select their title company. Their title company is responsible for development and drafting of the deed. Sometimes that deed language has to be changed or approved or switched around depending upon what quality of work we get from that title company. We also have to ensure that we have all of our lien sheets and lien abatements done and working so that that can be done as well with in order to be able to go to settlement and get that scheduled. Currently, we are working with Department of Finance as well as DPW and the mayor's office on a kind of lien abatement process mapping and also kind of double checking that process as well, because we have some things with the amount of properties that we're acquiring through INREM to try to make sure that those liens are fully abated once we take ownership, and then trying not to have liens accrue on those properties while the city also owns them, and working through what we can do in the confines of the law and where we can make sure that those are abated and moving. So we've done some great work over the last 8 months around lien abatements, and this is a top priority for the administration. Deputy Mayor Young last week was leading a multi-agency meeting specifically to kind of dive in a little bit more and figure out where some of those hiccups, little roadblocks, speed bumps in the road are, so that we can make sure that everybody is on the same page from finance to DPW and everything that's needed to get those abated. Because that is a big piece in terms of being able to meet disposition timing and disposition goals, are those lien abatements.
Sorry to cut you off, but I have a long-standing question and request about the vendor lien process. We still have not received an update from that because, I'm just be transparent, I'm at a standstill, and I think that we don't need a real estate committee. We just need one agency responsible for real estate, period, in the city. And I think we might have to resolve that through the charter review process, but I'm having difficulty having a comptroller's office and then housing DCHD, and then I still don't have an answer for what the vendor lien process is or the calculations for it. So just want to put that on the deputy mayor's mind, because I might have to put in a bill through the charter review process to create one office of real estate to resolve that issue, because it's becoming an issue that's still longstanding.
So that vendor lien process is also part of the review that has been happening and conversations of how best to support getting that. But that it has been something that a number of us have been hoping would have been moving along faster than it has been.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I made a very specific request that vendor lien program just go away and they put everything in INREM because it's duplicative. And so I think they're looking at all of that as well through that process. And just to clarify what the Commissioner's talking about relative to lien abatement is that in INREM, the liens are gone, like they're gone, but in our systems, they're still there. So we have to make sure that in our systems, they are gone, okay? And that's the challenge, is that, you know, the systems still say that there's a water bill when the court said, no, there's no water bill. So it's been a challenge to get through all of that, but I think there is some progress, but it's frustrating because, you know, without, everybody was supposed to like check off that they push the button that said the lien is abated, and then they take too long to push the button, then it gets accrued. It's a total mess. And so they're working through the process to streamline all of that.
Yes, so that is what, and we are also looking at how to support the efficient, effective, and quick abatement of the liens that are on the outside, where that process or lack of vendor lien is actually holding up a private transaction to move a property back
this
into.
is all over my
To
district.
move a property back into productive use.
The third
So
party
we have, so we have two different avenues, and both need attention, with both having attention, one of which, we're working with our partners at the comptroller's office on, which would be how to best tackle that side. And then, we move into compliance as well. So wanted to give some understanding too of what we have in terms of some underway. So we have 76 currently that are in the BOE process, which is that, whether or not it's actually in the kind of 2 to 4 weeks leading up to a BOE meeting and rooting for signature. 6 are in settlement preparation, and 2 are in that real estate review as well. So we do have 84 that are currently under process in terms of disposition. There are, we have 17 real estate agents? Yes. 17, I was just double checking my math memory. 17 real estate agents in DHCD that work both on dispositions as well as acquisitions to help move the work along. So we wanted to also make sure, this was one of the items talking about in terms of some of the work that has happened and moving forward applications for some of the fixed pricing. This is also for-profit as well as community land trust applications that we've received. So since March of 2024, we received over 3,200 paid applications. Now that's just people applying for properties, which could be multiple people applying for the same properties, or, we've received that number of actual paid applications. We've had a number of community land trusts come in, over 19 for those. A number of those were for either undefined for the land trust use as green space or residential, or for rent as well for mixed use and or solely residential. In terms of for-profit development, there were over 1,200, almost 1,300 that we received. Some had some applicants' personal use that was noted on the applications for green space, mixed use. For rent was 341. For homeownership outcomes was 299 through that. On the next slide, we have some data on homeowner applicants as well, receiving over almost 1,500 applications from homeowners looking to purchase property for their personal residence or moving that forward as well. And some of that being, applying for as a homeowner, but also noting on the application that they wanted to rent it. And also stating that they wanted to have that for sale as well. And then in terms of the applicant actually residing at the property, we had about 241 of those applications where the homeowner indicated that they wanted to actually reside in the property, and a couple of those were also tied to side yards. In terms of nonprofit applications, so the small nonprofits was over 212 applications that we received. And then our larger nonprofits were coming in around 16 applications as well. And you had the mix, same mix in terms of looking at whether or not that was going to be for the applicant's use. We get some for green space for the vacant lots and so forth, whether or not there was going to be rental or for sale homeownership outcomes as well. Wanted to talk about compliance, because I know this is a question that has come up I know Councilman Jones has had questions about compliance and kind of what that decision tree looks like and how we end up getting to certain decisions about compliance. So overall, these are the general steps that we have for compliance, or also what we call non-performance options that come in. So we have kind of that introduction letter that goes out to kind of, state, making sure that they're aware that they're in compliant, that they need to be in compliance with what the terms were of the LDA. We do a permit check letter 3 months after that intro letter. And then we do 2 additional permit checks. So every 3 months, we're also doing an additional permit check. If there are no permits that have been applied for, we provide a 15-day notice to comply and to move that in terms of getting information from them, and 15-day notice to comply. I would also like to state that during that time, we also get responses, because 15-day notice to comply can often compel someone to respond. But we do want to see and work with them, because it is also sometimes easier to work with a person and help bring them into compliance versus trying to just go down a legal route. So I think that that's also kind of, Councilman Jones, one of those decision points comes in at that place too. Like, what are the circumstances that have been holding this up? Is there a clear path forward? Are they able to meet something? What can we talk to them about, and how to make that happen? We provide then the certificate of completion after a use or occupancy permit is issued and the terms of the LDA are met. So we can, grant extensions. So, we look at that, like I said, trying to help people to make sure that they are able to work through. We do know that we have had people that have not been granted extensions, that we will not grant extensions to, and it all depends on how those people are showing up, what their needs are, how can we help them, how can we support them, and if there is not a path forward, then we definitely have a decision, point there in terms of what the next option will be. So one of those options is, can we work to actually assign that property through either a new LDA and to the Board of Estimates, and assign that property to a different developer. We have had that occur where developer A has not been in compliance. They've hit whatever roadblocks they've hit. Some of those roadblocks are financial. Some of them are companies dissolved. We've seen husband and wife development teams get divorced, like you name it, you could have people come up, right? So a decision point there is then how do we, look to that? And sometimes we've been able to support, and sometimes it's that the developer has come to us and said, I can't do this, and I have found someone, and we'd like to move this, assignment to a new developer. Sometimes we're at the table, or the community's at the table, making a suggestion on somebody that might be interested or capable to kind of step in and have that assignment take place. But that does involve a new land disposition agreement and new LDA approval. One of the decision points that comes there is if we find in the process of this work that there are liens on the property, but liens or encumbrances from the property being used as collateral for either a mortgage or a line of credit, a rehab mortgage, then that prevents us from sometimes being able to assign that property. And therefore, then we would have to see what are the other options. If it does have encumbrances or liens, or it is collateral for loans and financing purposes, then it is often going to be that we cannot execute the reverter clause that is in the LDA. And at that point, the decision point typically then is to work through the property through receivership at that point, because it becomes more difficult to move through the legal components because you can't, do that reverter. One of the instances that could come into play it would then be, like I said, doing that receivership process at that point in time. So currently, we have 541 properties that are in an active LDA compliance. This is also something that we kind of switched in the last, I think it was 2 years ago now. 2 years ago we got moved, Stacy? Sooner than that? A year and a half? Kind of reframing thinking. Yeah, about 2 years in terms of having a stronger focus on the compliance piece of the work, being able to kind of move that through. We have 541 properties and 203 total entities that are in the compliance pipeline. We have 240 of those are in that kind of checking permitting stage. Then the reminder letter 1, we have 44. Reminder letter 2 is at 107. Reminder letter 3 is at 25. So reminder letter 2 is really the bulk of kind of the stage that we have for compliance, and kind of moving through where people are, and that gets us to that 541. So in terms of some of the things that we're looking at moving forward, we've been looking at the older land disposition agreements to make sure if these were projects that were pre-2020. So when we say older LDAs, these are some of the older ones, whether or not they were for single-family residential properties that were disposed of, but we also had some older LDAs around vacant land, vacant lots. Some of those need actually either formal termination. Some have terminated the LDA. We just had one pop up last week or the week before, where they're like, okay, we're ready to go on the LDA. And we're like, your LDA expired 2 years ago, so we're not going anywhere. But we need to have that conversation with them to see, what is actually happening and how close this is. We also are improving our detail of the tracking and better integration with the other workflows that we have within the disposition process, as well as the development process, also with the feedback loop that we're creating as part of the whole block strategy implementation and block level planning components. What we're seeing is that if there is anything from those canceled LDAs or terminated LDAs, that those would go back into kind of what the current inventory is. And we're also rethinking some of the alignment between the proof of funds to purchase versus the estimated costs. There are some smaller projects and some larger projects with capital campaigns, and they kind of differ. So how can we kind of also look at that in terms of what's actually needed, where a smaller project of $175,000 rehabilitation could definitely work, and that 90,000, still stays. That 90,000 was put into place, and we changed that about 4 years ago to better align with the requirements that are needed during receivership auction, so that there was less confusion. There was, kind of showing that 90,000 could definitely get things going, get things moving. But some of the larger projects we have, we need to see a little bit more. If you're looking at something, that is going to be a larger multifamily conversion or something along those lines with, some vacant land or vacant lots and 10 units, $90,000 doesn't really fit the bill there. So we are doing some better alignment there, and also rethinking some of the terms in order to give us what we would say and has described here as more teeth to recoup either the funds or the reverter options. And one of the items that Deputy Commissioner Redfern has been looking at too is the better use of a soft second, of some kind of soft second on the property, and how we can make that work to help achieve our goals there. A soft second would be a different type of soft second mortgage that could be on a property that would give us standing in terms of finance and so forth. So depending upon your type, a lot of down payment and closing cost assistance is considered to be a soft second on a property. So if we provide, let's say we provide $20,000 in down payment and closing cost assistance, that basically reduces $5,000 over, every year. That's considered a soft second, but it gives us standing in terms of subordination and where we are in terms of the legal process for having rights to the properties. So also looking at how we're engaging, with the developers, with the community, with the work, as we stated before, the properties that we're working on and that come up are based off of the block level planning strategies and the work with communities. The neighborhood development team helps lead that engagement and visioning. That's one of the things that's happening down in Carrollton Ridge tonight as we speak. Also the community partner engagement sessions, the Buy Into Be More website. It does offer individual property offerings, but we are also, that's one area that Deputy Redfern has been diving in since she's come back to the agency in terms of diving in on Buy Into Be More. Are we using that, to optimize all of the functionality on that site? Are we getting what we need to make sure that we're able to use it fully to kind of move things through? And, all of our competitive offerings are posted and advertised on the website for development opportunities. But one of the big things there is that, DHCD made a commitment several years ago to not just post these 5 properties for a spring RFP offering or a spring EOI offering without creating or having in place the stronger community engagement of what meets the master plan for the community. If the master plan exists, what are the outcomes that the community wants to see? Does that align with the master plan? Does that align with, the vision and how we're going to reach that vision? And then better situating the property with those terms. So instead of putting XYZ property out, just say, give us, tell us what you want to build here. We've made the commitment to put that out and say, we want to see proposals for a mixed income, mixed use, multifamily development on this, or we want to see proposals for single family detached homes at varying income levels. So we kind of work ahead of time to make that happen. We continue to engage with residents through direct customer outreach, distribution lists, making sure that people, we have currently over 60,000 people in different categories. Also any of our news releases, social media posts, cross-agency collaboration, as also in terms of how we share information through the PIO network. And then we also share a significant amount of information and updates as well on the coffee break with Alice that we've been doing for a number of years now to keep people engaged and informed. And with that, that kind of rounds out the formal presentation that we had for you this evening, and I think we did pretty okay on time.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to go with committee members. I'll go with the vice chair first, and then each member has one question to start off.
Okay.
For the first round, and then we'll come back and I'll do last, and then we'll start the next round. No follow-ups either.
I was going to go there, but thank you. I appreciate the backup. I have several questions, but I'll just start with...
For just one question?
I have several questions, but I will start with one at the direction of the chair. At our last hearing, we had this super handy dandy slide that I'm sure you anticipated my asking about, that talks about the disposition receiving BOE approval within 120 days, and it was about 15 properties at the time. And I had asked for some clarity because, there's, as you've articulated in the slides, there's, steps to the process, and I want to know a little bit better about what the timing is. Got it that there are some owners that don't get back to you in a timely fashion. I get that part. But we did want to try to get these approvals done fairly quickly so that people can then do the next step, which is to rehab the property. So I just wondered, is this, I guess we're not using this 120-day metric at all? What do we, because it's not in your slides that you presented today.
Yeah, it's not in the slides that we presented today. So there's a number of different components around the KPIs that are also being adjusted at the administration level that we're looking at. Deputy Redfern and I have, talked about this as recently as even this afternoon. There are also a couple of other components. So on the fixed pricing, we know that we are, and I believe on that slide or in one of the notes from the last hearing too, we were able to look at fiscal year 25 on the KPIs for 120 days was coming in around 90. It was like 91% of the properties that we're moving through.
This says 22% in 26 and 46% in 25.
Right, and that was one of the things, because on the other KPI, we were trying to reconcile the two different versions within the budget book as well as within the OPI, what is kind of considered the official OPI KPI that we follow. One of the issues we did have as well is that the staff person that did budget book left, and we were also trying to make sure what the standard recording procedure was for that KPI and making adjustments. And we actually, that's something that the administration is doing across all agencies currently and have been looking for. We want to, and I think some of the pieces in terms of being able to hit a time frame that is less than 120 days is important to both myself and Deputy Redfern. A couple of the things that will help us do that is definitely work on the lien release process that we're working on the internal one. Not necessarily, the vendor one will help for some things, but a big one, and this is why Deputy Mayor Young has agreed as well to prioritize this in terms of the collaborative cross-agency vacancy work that he leads, is to really work on getting that piece kind of moving forward. Deputy Commissioner Redfern also has a different also pieces of the puzzle that she's looking at in terms of trying to create efficiencies and streamline and what and where are the workflows to be able to create those levels of efficiency.
So the goal is still to do as much as we can to get below the 120 days. We're not doing 90 because I think that was a little bit, as you said in the last hearing, probably more aggressive than.
Yep.
But the 120, I just don't want people to be waiting so long for the properties. We've already, and I get that you need to do the vetting and all of that. So there would be some efficiencies in the vetting process. Getting this lien release down would be helpful. Obviously, we've got a little bit of a difficulty in my district with a third-party lien. That's a whole different issue, which, I know we're using those properties as an example for how to handle that.
And we've also, we've been looking at it too as the time frame from the time of award to the time of BOE in that time.
No, that's right. So it's not the time of that we get the property. I get that. So when we get the property, we're waiting to see whether or not, once we acquire it through INREM, we're waiting to see whether it fits with whole block outcomes and who the developer partner is. And then once there's an agreement as to that person is going to take the property, then the award letter goes out, and that's the time. Yeah, I'm clear about that. So it's just a matter of how do we get that person the property quicker than.
Anything else you want to add on that?
Okay. I appreciate that. So, because do we have stats now on where we are with the 120 days?
Those are currently being updated.
So can we get that as a follow-up committee request? Is the percentage of the dispositions that have been done within the 120 days?
You got that, Tony?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Councilman Blanchard?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the topic of Charter Review Committee request, we're looking at BOE stuff. What goes before the BOE, what doesn't go before. I am sort of generally of the perspective that we have we actually have a lot of tools in place to protect against from a good governance and transparency perspective, sort of across the city and whatnot. And there's a lot of things that go before the BOE that don't need to, and it's not just a procurement cost. Do you think we should, like, if we're trying to tackle the vacancy crisis, does it make sense for LDAs, from your perspective, for LDAs to be going through the BOE?
I will start off by saying one of the things that I think could be helpful to look at, and I've talked about this with, members of the mayor's team as well, that could be helpful in terms of speeding up different parts of the process. Right now, not just looking at LDAs on the disposition side, but looking at the acquisition side, ground rent acquisitions. So acquiring our ground rent is a type of property acquisition, and where you are within the charter and the code would need to go to the BOE. But these are all transactions that typically are like $300, $90, $32, $600, $1,200. And so typically when you look at a transaction amount of that, the transaction amount is definitely not one that would trigger BOE need, but it's because it's tied to the property acquisition where it falls into the charter review and so forth. So, and the different powers that we're using for that acquisition.
So you're saying there might be a good opportunity to look at like a minimum amount to trigger going through the BOE for these property acquisitions?
Or if it's not just minimum amount, that could be for the BOE for the property transactions, then it could be carving out the type of transaction or the type of acquisition that needs to go to the Board of Estimates, right? I could see something where a ground rent, might not need to go, but a condemnation acquisition would need to go. So I would say that that's something, for potential consideration. I think that it is useful, the same thing potentially for the LDAs. What we did for fixed pricing is the board approved the template for the fixed pricing LDA, and they approved, which we have language that is approved by the BOE for a number of different transactions within the Department of Housing and Community Development that provides the commissioner the authority to execute the LDA after, as long as it meets these sales prices and so forth. So we've kind of fixed that process. So like the fixed pricing LDAs themselves don't have to go to the board because we're just doing one lump approval of all of the property addresses. So it could come down to price threshold as well. I don't know, do you have, Deputy, anything that you would opine on in terms of if
Whether we should be going to the Board of Estimates?
for the LDAs?
I think that we.
Yep.
I think that there's room for improvement. Good evening, Madam Vice Chair and Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Councilman Blanchard, for the question. I think that there is room for improvement in the LDAs, yes. Whether or not we need to go to the Board of Estimates, we can look at that. I would offer that the more we come up with different processes for the way we have to do our work, it can impact the way we do our work, right? Because then we'll do leaseholds one way, we'll do ground rents one way. Every time we add a step like that, we continue, I believe, we increase the possibility of making an error, if I'm honest.
Okay. I appreciate it. Just saying that, if there's things that are unnecessarily slowing stuff down, it is charter review season, and this tackling the vacancy crisis is certainly, important enough to be considering on the charter review committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when looking at the, disposition compliance process review, they initially get the first letter out. I'm just trying to make sure I have the right understanding. And within 3 months, if they don't have the first permits, they get the second letter out, and then, the first letter, and then after 3 more months, they get the second letter out. So what happens if they initially pull permits, maybe, but then don't really do any work and didn't pull any follow-up permits and just kind of sitting for the ones that stall? Is there a check review process, or where does that kind of fall in, and where does the timeline start again with those?
Good evening again, Councilman.
Good evening.
So the property would stay in the compliance bucket until it's complete, right? And so until we have a use and occupancy permit, we would continue to do our monitoring. And so it doesn't matter if they pulled permits, right? And then we check again a couple of months later to see if permits have expired or if they're still in place. What I'm trying to say is that we would continue to check on the property until there's a use and occupancy permit, right? And so what that means is it can come in and out. Sometimes it will have permits, sometimes it may not. Sometimes it may have a different type of permit, but we are monitoring that entire process until we can issue a certificate of completion.
In general, typically, how long is that check in, check out? How much time usually? Is it like usually a year before you all check back again, or is it like 6 months you might check back in and follow up on a property?
No, if we were at full capacity, we would be checking permits to make sure that properties are moving along the 12-month schedule that the LDA gives for completion. So that means we're looking at properties every couple of months to make sure that it's moving.
Couple months, 3, 4,
3.
just about
2
3
or 3,
months. Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. So I'll go a little deeper into it because my interest is different because a large portion of my district is a part of this whole block strategy. I've had my disagreements with this council about the zoning legislation. My biggest issue now is, and I'm generally afraid because looking at history and black wealth in my neighborhoods, I want to know, what are we doing to purposely provide opportunities to build black wealth in this strategy? Because Live Baltimore's survey proved me right, where the majority of people who want to own a home, oh, I forgot Councilman Glover, my bad. I'm gonna go
It's
to
all
you.
good. No, I came back. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's okay.
The majority of our residents who look like me want to own a home in West Baltimore, right? In the zoning legislation, I need to be more intentional, right? When I work with the mayor's office about getting black people interested in West Baltimore, it worked. We now have a majority of homeowners in Reservoir Hill who are black, upper middle class incomes. We now have a grocery store. I want to know how we're going to be very intentional when I have people like Blackstone walking through Sandtown, Winchester, waiting for us to get out there so that they can then own homes and do what people have done in the past, rent them to black people and not give them access to land. So I want to know, have we really intentionally thought about a wealth strategy for black residents in West Baltimore?
That's an excellent question. I think that there's kind of multiple components to that we've looked at. One of them is that we have had conversations with the administration and CA Leach specifically about part of the growth strategy, and that being a key part of the growth strategy for the city in terms of specific outcomes, specific programs, specific policy changes or things that might need to be in place to support the generation of black wealth in a way to support that homeownership outcomes. So I would say that is, one of those conversations in terms of kind of the more comprehensive review that we've been looking for, or more comprehensive plan. There are ways that we do support that now. We have partnered specifically with Live Baltimore on their Buy Back the Block program. I know that is a priority. It hasn't just been a priority for me as commissioner, going back to talking around a table with Annie about how can we, support creating black wealth through having renters become homeowners. So we've had a commitment to that program, a commitment for the future of the program as well. The other thing that we're working on, we have within DHCD a Fuse Fellow that has been with us for a number of months now, specifically looking at the pipeline of increasing black homeownership within the city. The working title for the program right now is Protect the Nest. And that is what they've, the staff has reported up. So if you hear that is the same thing in terms of like a working program that they've been working on. One of the key things that we've found in terms of also helping from a comprehensive standpoint for supporting and having, people become homeowners, Black residents in Baltimore that are renting that want to become homeowners, is being able to not just provide the financial down payment and closing cost assistance that's needed, but what I call the comprehensive wraparound service of homeownership coaching, which is different than homeownership counseling. And that is one of the key things and why we put in over a year ago the proposal for a Fuse Fellow to specifically look at what we needed to do to expand homeownership coaching in the city as part of that strategy to increase Black homeownership and that support. It goes everything from not just looking at what is needed for down payment and closing cost assistance, budgeting, as well as if anybody does need credit repair assistance to be eligible for, buying a house, and then also looks at wraparound in terms of how and what to do and how to engage in civic, get involved in community association. We've looked at everything from the different AMI percentages in terms of attracting not just how to help renters that want to become homeowners at different varying levels of affordability, but also through some of our partnerships, also looking at the attraction of the Black middle class, as you said, like what you're seeing too in Reservoir Hill and so forth. And we've seen some really good examples of that just in terms of what we've been able to support and learn from some of the things that have happened in Reservoir Hill and how we've been able to support outcomes like that in areas like Upton with 800 block of Harlem and Edmondson and other areas. So we have some programs that are part of it. Is it a comprehensive full strategy at this point? No. Do we want that to be the case? Yes. Has it been part of the conversations when we look at growth strategy for Baltimore? Absolutely.
I want to make a committee request. I would like to have a larger conversation about this because, and I mean it so heartily, I was sent here by Black people to serve their interests in this council, and this council has failed my residents, and I want to make sure that their wealth is protected, but also while we're trying to get over the appraisal gap in assessments, everything that we have been burdened with, I want to make sure that we're thinking deeper than just what's cute with as recurring, right? And just being transparent, right? Progressives have always failed Black people in terms of advancing their agenda, and we're left behind. And as a person who, I describe as a progressive that's pragmatic. Pragmatism says that if Black people need to have their wealth protected, I need to figure that out. Also, I want to make sure that we, in the part of that conversation, Tony, I want to talk about how do we use tax incentives to ensure that we ensure anti-displacement, because I saw what happened when I lived in Remington and Black residents were forced out and poor white residents were forced out when development took place in 18 months and their property taxes took a hit in the next 2 cycles when Scott Hockett. I think that when we think about a whole block, we have now created another market. And I just want to make sure we're thinking proactively around the blocks that we identified to make sure we're ready for those supports. Because I don't want, and I say this right now because after talking to your office, talking to others, I'm afraid that might happen in Penn North with the 32 homes that we are now renovating, right? I don't want to displace someone who has upheld our tax base for the longest, has dealt with the brunt of the war on drugs and everything else, to be pushed out and then they have to live in some senior living facility because they can't live in the neighborhood anymore. Yeah. And I say this as someone who has family who lived across the street from Patterson Park, who lived in Fed Hill when they were Black neighborhoods, and they also Canton. And by 2005, they were all gone. I think we need to be very intentional. Thank you. I'm gonna go with Councilman Glover.
Thank you.
Oh, real quick, I just wanted to say I appreciate everything that you just said and agree wholeheartedly about the anti-displacement strategy. It has been one of the key things, even when we were looking at the housing plan, not just the growth strategy, but also the housing plan, that it would have a very specific intentional anti-displacement strategy as part of that as well. And it is something that I continue to raise as one of the concerns as we are doing this work, because the anti-displacement isn't just And I've brought this up several times at different stages, and I want to make sure that it is very clear on the record here that we need to be looking at not just a huge focus of the work has been on the anti-displacement or, development without displacement of the front end of, we're not going to move people, demolish homes to make way for new development unless, there are certain communities where, we have to work through that balance of different things. But a huge focus has been on that front end side where it's like, okay, we're not going to go in, we're not looking to do mass acquisition, mass relocation, and have seen, the impacts of that over time. That has been a huge focus of the conversation and the dialogue, and I continue to stress and will continue to use a voice to explain that we have to be very focused and intentional on what is going to happen 3 years in from the work that we're doing and 5 years and 10 years in, because we are going to end up in a situation where people are displaced or where our families cannot move back to the communities that they grew up in if we don't figure out what those guardrails are using every tool in the toolbox that we have as a city, whether or not that is different incentives, whether or not that is looking at different financial incentives, tax incentives, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, estate planning. Every single tool in the toolbox needs to be evaluated and used in an intentional way to help achieve what you're specifically talking about.
And I wholeheartedly agree. Like, I even started the conversation on LIHTC tax credit buildings, because if I have too many of them in a census tract, the feds will say this is a permanently disadvantaged neighborhood,
Yep.
which means I can't get a bank, I can't get a grocery store.
Yep.
All these things that we know that we need in these neighborhoods. It doesn't matter how many middle-class families I move in or how many people I get a job. That permanently disadvantage is there even for just 160 units, but if I change it to workforce housing, it's a different conversation, and it doesn't get that same delineation, just all because someone's getting a tax shelter and a fee that allows them to have a $1 for dollar
So
write-off.
I just wanted to follow, just to say that we have to be looking at the different stages, because if we only are focused on the first stage, we're missing the larger piece of the puzzle is what is happening as we're implementing Reframe Baltimore throughout the entire stage of not just the next 15 years, but the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and 50 years.
All right, I appreciate you. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we have these hearings, I'm still also educating myself and to this informational hearing, and I clearly, echo the sentiments of my colleague, because like in East Baltimore, we're going through the same thing. You and I have multiple conversations also with some of those community partners that are women that are really strong and want to see that we continue to retain our legacy residents that are right there in our community. What I ask is, when it comes to properties that have been vacant for a very long time, and now we're going after those properties, it's similar to the conversation I'm quite sure that we had with the care community in reference to a property where it is going up for receivership, and how do we in the community, or how do I as a council person get that information back to community folk, residents that live there, to say we want to retain the property here, we want to purchase the property here, as opposed to going out to developers that's bidding on a property, rehabbing the property. Now the property is going for XYZ amount of dollars, and what happens is sometimes it just takes one, and then that next developer he duplicates the same with that developer there, and before you know it, we're now pushing the residents that live there out of the community. How do we retain it? How do we take it off the auction, I guess, block, to make sure that we in the community that live there that want to retain the property, buy the property, keep it here in our neighborhood?
That's a great question. Specific to that one property, I think one of the things, and I've talked to Miss Cynthia about this, and we'll be meeting with her as well. I have a long, standing 16-year history of working with Miss Cynthia in care.
Dr. Doris, all of them.
And all of them. But one of the key things for care at this point that we're seeing from a standpoint On the positive side, we're seeing that currently, I think we're looking at, it's less than 15 vacant properties in the entire neighborhood. So, over time, and I remember, 20 years ago when I worked for a development company and, we were purchasing properties and care for renovation and, development work for rehab and renovation. And there's been a long, standing thing. One of the key things that comes into play with a neighborhood, and CARE is not the only neighborhood like this, but it kind of plays out as an example, is that when you get to a tipping point where there is a lower number of vacant properties with VBNs, it becomes harder in terms of what are the tools in our toolbox, and then the cost associated with that to create the outcomes that we need to create and how to play that out. So none of the properties right now in that neighborhood are in REM eligible, so that takes that off of the list. None are available at, through just normal kind of tax sale certificate component. Up until recently, we also have not had a significant number of, or a significant amount of money that could be used to do condemnation and acquisition through condemnation eminent domain, which we still also have to make sure that we're meeting the thresholds to be able to utilize that tool as well, which can come in terms of the percentage of vacant properties on the block face, et cetera. So that leaves other tools such as receivership that comes into play, because the city is going to be limited in what tool we have, where the city can acquire it and then be supportive to sell that property to a community association or local CDC. One thing I do want to remind everybody is we have had community organizations or CDCs or their development partners successfully purchase properties at receivership auction. They have to have the same financing in place and so forth. We have seen that happen, but it is something that we need to look at from what tools in our toolbox can we use and how can we help the neighborhoods that are in that situation realize their vision for some community-owned spaces. I know I was just talking with the chair about another neighborhood that's trying to look at some community-owned purchases. I've had this conversation with Miss Allen from Heritage Crossing and how best to try to support something like that, because sometimes the city doesn't have the right necessarily tool that we could use to help support that type of transaction either. So it takes a little bit more analysis, a little bit more partnership, a little bit more kind of figuring out, because it isn't straightforward.
But are there any statutory or regulatory barriers that may slow down the process of acquisition where we on the council could probably remove some of those things?
Right now, we have the best and fastest acquisition method that we have is in REM tax lien foreclosure, but it's very specific on what is allowable there, how we can work through that, and what we can do. And we do see a number of properties that don't meet that. Condemnation in eminent domain is not something that the council can actually, regulatory introduce something or legislatively introduce something, because we're bound by federal regulations on that and being able to move things forward.
All right. So, and one more thing, Mr. Chair, it's just because I think about when Mr. Chair was mentioning about Patterson Park, the families he had that lived across the street from Patterson Park, and like my grandmother, for over 30-some years, lived on Patterson Park, and those were those 3-story homes, right? And before you know it, you seen it was the Native Indians and it was African Americans that lived all through that community, and slowly but surely you started to see, Caucasians coming to the community, and slowly, because we couldn't afford to purchase the homes, they began to purchase the homes, and we began to see first the Native Indians were gone. There is not probably one in the community. And then we started to see, African Americans then leave because we could no longer afford either the rent or we didn't get loans to purchase those properties. And and that's in the Butchers Hill community. You really seen a dramatic change. And I'm just hoping that, the legacy residents that we do have, there's maybe I can count on my hand, maybe 2 or 3 that are still in the neighborhood, that's been there, that started the community garden, that brought the community together. Like, it's like those are the last of the ones that are left over, and they ask me all the time, like, how do we bring it back? And then the community association themselves said to me, you know, like, Councilman, you help us get a consultant where we can get more Black, like, home ownership in the community? And they ask these things at community association meetings. So it's like, what can we do as a city to promote, to bring more of, you know, African Americans back to the community? We do have a huge population of Latino that are coming into community as well, they're building up, and there's a sense of community. But again, you know, no one's giving these loans to the Black community or the Latino community to purchase these homes. And we're like at a standstill. So what do we do as a city to change the trajectory of that? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem, Councilman, and thank you, because that is something that we really have to talk about in terms of working with our banking institutions. Because wholeheartedly, when I look at the commercial loans rates for African Americans in this state alone, just to afford the amount of money that you need to get a multifamily dwelling, their loan rate was around 7% for Black people with good credit, right? 7%. Whereas it's around the upper 40s for a person who's not Black. And then Latinos was around less than that. We are in and I say this wholeheartedly, we're not gonna undo racism, we're gonna undo systematic discrimination, but we as a council have to work with the mayor's office and others and thoughtfully think about the tools we have in place to provide a level playing field, because we're not gonna control the loan officer, who's gonna make the decision. But what we can do is create an environment where we have come together to create an opportunity for people who could do it for them, right? I say this because a lot of people in my district were not interested. A lot of people who are now doing work in my district who weren't Black are now interested in my district. And it was Black developers who were leading in that space to renovate West Baltimore. And it's incumbent on us, and I say this from talking to colleagues in DC and also talking to 2 colleagues from New York, and was discussing the things that we've done recently. Their biggest issue is that they never had local control and prioritized local and Black developers in Harlem and Bed-Stuy and DC. And I think that's something that we could work together on, because that's one of their regrets. And then the other regret is that they had to pass legislation similar to inclusionary housing, because when people had multi-family dwellings, they weren't accepting Section 8 vouchers. So that was displacing people as well. And they had to go back and change the law again to do it. And I say this, but like to our colleagues, Minneapolis was a hot market. Baltimore has few hot markets. We need to really think about those markets where we are creating a market, right? This strategy isn't about hot markets. This is about government intervention that is specific. And as we have controls over this intervention, we need to think the thoughtfulness behind it. And that's why I appreciate you, Commissioner Kennedy, because the first conversation we had was around how can we get someone to own a home that's affordable permanently. I've had debates with some of my colleagues about land trust, because I firmly believe I don't need to give you 40% of my equity on the way out the door if that is my wealth vehicle. So we have to figure out the tools and what's right for each other. And I appreciate you for having this conversation. And I just want to say, colleagues, this is a safe space to have that conversation, because ultimately we got to figure it out together. I'm going to go with Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add a second to that, I mean, one of the things that I've talked about with the vacant reduction strategy is that we need to acquire all of them. And that way we can have the control around working with residents, working with the outcomes that we want. And I know that there's some emphasis, particularly in the BVRC, but in other places too, that we need to make sure that there's more private transactions. Well, that's already got us into hot water already, right? We've got these, New York investors that have come, and have not done what we want them to do. So I've always said that we need to fast track getting the capacity that we need to be able to acquire everything through in REM 1 and 2, once we pass it, through, whatever means necessary so that we can control it. And but we are not going fast enough. I mean, this is not the acquisition hearing, but once we do have it, we've said in the past that we're only at half of where we even wanted to be in terms of cases filed for in rem. So more capacity there is going to be important, and we can have that control. The legislation that's before the council now, relative to the upzoning, is not strategic and intentional. It's not. And I think that's something that I find interesting if we're talking about being strategic and intentional about our communities, and then we have this bill that's not strategic or intentional, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I get that sometimes we need to make the numbers work, right, for some of our bigger houses, but I think that needs to be at a case-by-case basis. So my question is not related to any of that. Commissioner, I had a question about the fixed price versus open bid, okay? I'm been very clear that I think everything that we dispose needs to be fixed price. You've already have the list of what everything is and who the owner is supposed to be. I don't understand why we have a separate process, to the deputy commissioner's point of if we have too many processes, we're gonna mess up something. Why are we still doing open bid? Because
That's a great question, but the main reason is because it needs to be a separate or different type of LDA contract. So I'll give you an example of when we would use that. We do our best to be consistent with the pricing, right? So that's across the board, whether it's open bid or if it's fixed price. If we're gonna sell it for $3,000, we're not changing it just because we consider it open bid. But one of the reasons why we use open bid, a good example would be what we're doing with the TIF, right? So we are giving TIF funds on a number of properties that are also going through the LDA process right now. What we have done is put a clause in the LDA that has a requirement for homeownership, right? So that is a reason why we would use open bid. It really is just the nomenclature. It's a term that we use when we are not using the standard fixed price one that does not have to, that goes to the Board of Estimates in a different way. But there are times when we have contracts that we need contract language that's a little bit different, that gives us a little either more teeth, right? Or it puts the developer in a position to be more successful. So that's why, that's the main distinction right now, right?
But open bid, to me, I thought it was that, you take the applications and, you take a bid, and open bid is much more like lack of control. It's really about
No, that's why I said it's really the nomenclature, I think, that is getting mixed up right now, right? Our main reason for saying open bid is really that it is not the fixed price template. We are using a different LDA template that allows us to have flexibility to either add or remove language that is really specific to that development project.
The pricing state, like in a lot of these situations, the price is, we're trying to maintain that
be
price.
Consistent. Yeah.
And be consistent, unless it is a larger, like, RFQ process or RFP process there.
Right. Oh, I understand the RFP and RFQ process. That's totally different, right? The RFQ and RFP process is where we have a lot of properties that are coming together that we're presenting to somebody. But that's not, because I can pick up from my computer, I can look at two different examples.
I was trying to remember if the deputy commissioner and I could think of like a specific property address and to why, it would fall under fixed price versus open bid, where you would see that there isn't, as the deputy said, much difference in terms of just which LDA template is being used and why we needed to use that for different clauses.
So why do we organize it that way? Because it seems like if we're going with open bid, like, okay, we'll take the Gorsuch properties, right? The Gorsuch properties, initially, we knew that they were all gonna be, part of, acquired through in REM, and we were gonna go through the process. We have a developer who's actually the guy who lives next door. And, but then there was a mistake, and the staff was like, no, this is open bid. And I was like, there's no way this is open bid. We're not just leaving it to everybody, because we already,
I think that that's what I'm trying to describe. The mistake that was being referred to, it was the different type of LDA, land disposition agreement. Right, so we can do our best to come away from using the term open bid, but we have very few unsolicited or open bid properties at this time. Most things follow the fixed price model. But like I said, when there's an instance when we want to add language, we use a different land disposition agreement. And that is what we have been referring to as open bid. But we will do our best to change that.
that I think would be helpful in terms of the confusion. There may be like a LDA 1 and LDA 2, just, I mean, whatever. But like, because I think because otherwise it's confusing as to whether or not they're going to have like a open application.
Like in the situation of, in the example of Gorsuch, there was never a situation where that was going to be open.
Right, no,
for
never. We had all these
many,
agreements,
like,
yeah.
So it goes down to what the deputy, what Deputy Redfern said in terms of the nomenclature and the wording and the titling, which is also kind of just historic wording that has been in place, but we can look at that to eliminate that confusion.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And we would need to do that on the buy into Be More as well. I think buy into Be More is still super confusing also. Do we have a timeline on when that's going to change? Nope, okay. Can we get a?
We're actively working, we're working on it.
Actively working on it, okay. So you actively working on it, meaning in a year, it's in 6 months, 3 months?
I don't think it's going to be 3 months. It's possible that it could be 6 months.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I would call it Buy Into Be More 2.0, right? There are a number of things that we need to do based on what we've learned since we launched, right? And so we want to augment some things, we need to pivot on some things, and a lot of it is based on needing to have new programming done to the system that we use.
Right.
And so it's not a short process, it's actually a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah.
So I'm hesitant to commit to a time, but please know that it is to our benefit to improve, right? The staff is asking.
Yeah.
Because we have learned
Yeah.
how we're using it now can be augmented. So we're
Right.
actively pursuing that.
Okay, well, for the next meeting, I'd like an update on that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, we'll put that down, and trust me, I hate buying into Be More.
confusing.
I'm gonna say this again, I was promised Zillow and got Realtor.com. I'm still a little upset about it. It does not look what it was described as. It is still confusing to me, and I think I'm kind of tech savvy, But I appreciate you for wanting to update it and staff saying that we need to improve it. The first step is admitting that we need to do it ourselves before someone else outside says we have to do it, but it is a good process. I'm gonna go with Councilman Blanchard. Perfect. Councilman Jones.
Yes, my question is regarding like the receivership process. I understand the importance of things in order to create transparency in things, so kind of inform the public, but I think sometimes there's often delays, which then creates frustration because what's in CodeMap may not actually be what's going on. I guess one of my receivership, and it says like pending. That's after it's been open. That's because you have receivership filed and open, and that's when it starts. Receivership pending is after kind of it already closed out, and when it says settled, it's all kind of done. So I guess my question is that are settled that we may still see in CodeMap, but they aren't available anywhere, or even when there's not or how does if someone has questions about them or interested in them, because they aren't necessarily in like a FQA either, and it's just on an individual basis. I guess how long does it take, I guess, for something to show up as settled and cold map to it actually being ready and prepared and on board? And how do we make that transparent enough so people don't look at, oh, what is the city doing? Because I understand there's titles and there's other things that may be happening during that process.
So, can I get clarification when you say that after it's settled, that it's ready and on board? Do you mean that the
Yeah.
construction is done and
Or
that you?
just available for purchase if someone's interested.
So when it's settled, it has been purchased. So when it's
Okay.
settled, it means that it's gone to receivership auction. So just a reminder on process that the receivership is not a form of city acquisition in any way.
Yeah, it's one house.
And
Okay.
the city does not take any form of ownership for receivership. Receivership is considered the highest form of code enforcement that we have. And data that we've been seeing over the last several years has been showing around 50% of all the receivership cases that we file, the owner themselves that owns the process that we filed on, that owns the property that we filed on, is actually taking the steps necessary to rehab the property on their own without it needing to go to auction and without someone else stepping in at that point. So it is a very good tool to use. I think, the vice chair and I have had many conversations, and I don't think it's unknown that we differ in opinion on the opinion of the city needing to purchase everything. Myself and other colleagues and Secretary Day and others, we've had conversations. We don't believe that as the city, we need to purchase every vacant property in order to see the change that we want. And receivership does work like that. So when it shows it's settled, that means that the receivership auction happened and that then the person that won the bid at auction has gone through the process and settled on that property. They should be show as the new owner, or they're in the process of having where it is in the time period to have the deed transferred on that.
Got it. So when it goes through that receivership process, it never necessarily transitioned to the city. It just goes
It
from one
never
entity.
transitioned.
Got it.
Never.
Got it. That's what I
The
was sure.
only time that it could transition to the city is under the legislation that we worked to pass with a change. We worked with the council, it passed, that changed in the building code, because that's where receivership is, that gives the city the ability to purchase a property if it does not sell at receivership auction.
Okay.
And so far, we have not enacted that because most things have been selling at receivership auction. But that is the only time where the city would take ownership, would be if a property did not sell it at receivership auction. We now have the authority and the ability to purchase that property from the receiver. So we would purchase that property from one house at a time.
Perfect. And I guess because this is round two, I can have two questions, Mr. Chair. My last question.
Only because I'm trying to make it to bedtime.
Okay. All right. Last question. When it comes to, has there been thought or questions around, I know we have multiple financing programs, but I often see one of the biggest hurdles from the small developers on getting these houses flipped is them having access to money or low interest loans. Where I know we have programs where we actually give grants that we're actually writing off and everything else. Has there been a thought of developing a pot of money so these developers can get a low interest loan or no interest loan that after they turn around, they can pay that back so that they can have access to capital? Because oftentimes that's one of the biggest hurdles, and then they're losing out on money and opportunity and everything else by paying the fees that come along with this. And
Yep. The very short answer is yes. It's actually part of Mayor Scott's Reframe Baltimore strategy, and has been one of the key things that we've been mentioning now for the last 3 years, in terms of creating that loan pool that can do low interest. And we actually don't want to set it up as a loan It actually, in order to have the largest impact possible, it needs to be a low-interest line of credit for both capital and operating.
Is that available already or up and running? Okay.
No, it's not available
Okay.
yet. There have been different pieces and parts of the puzzle in terms of figuring out how to put together the pool, the lending pool, and the amount needed for that lending pool. There also is some work by the Greater Baltimore Committee. They're doing some work with PNC and evaluating the ability to create something on, outside of city government as well. And then there's also the look at what could be done on inside city government as a lending option to provide those lines of credit, but what exact size of the loan pool and where that loan pool money would come from.
Thank you for that answer. But I think that would be key in helping this move forward as well. Appreciate it.
Councilman Glover.
I think even to my colleague's point, Councilman Jones, like I think about, so we have, Mr. Stokes, the properties that he doing in the district, beautiful properties, right? He turned a lot of shell like homes into, beautiful homes. And what I see is that, and I'm trying to figure out how is it that, between 1 and 3 block radius, right? A home, what I will say to me will be probably affordable, going off the fact that, how much money he probably put into the property. He and his partner were able to cut down a lot of money on so many things because they do the work themselves, right? The designing, things of that nature. But they're selling those homes for maybe a little over $200,000, right? And then you have, within, again, 1 to 3 blocks south, where the homes are like double the price. And it's like the amount of work that Mr. Stokes had put into the property is nowhere near the amount of work that these individuals are selling for $400,000. Like, how do we get the Stokes and his team of developers those properties in my community so they can continue to build up the community, right? At a very, very low price. And I even asked them, how are you guys able to even afford to do what you do at that price? And it's because they cut the middleman out of so much stuff and do their own design, their own everything. And that's the reason why. And my whole thing is, how do we continue to allow those individuals that are, again, building in our community? Homes are very beautiful. How do we get those properties to individuals such as them? And I'm quite sure, Commissioner, you've seen the properties, right? And they're beautiful properties. And they're turning them over within I don't even think it's a whole year, right?
Yeah, they're gorgeous properties. They're one of the development partners that are doing that all over the city in terms of have figured out how to, reduce the costs related to development and be smart with the funding sources. And that I'm also going to have Deputy Commissioner talk about how we just want to foster those relationships.
So currently, we have a couple of different models that we use to try to really meet the market and meet the developers that we work with, right? So part of that is the RFQ process that was started, I think it was the end of 2024. But last year, we made a decision, and I'm going to forget, I think 4 or 5 footprints where we made a decision to do the developer RFQ. So what that is really a registry of developers that can work in a certain footprint that has been pre-vetted. We think that that will help us move faster and will allow developers to get economies of scale, right? Because if they're working on an entire block, they can start that block at the same time. They can order their materials, they can buy their materials, things of that nature. I think the other thing that we are doing to try to help in this area is that it's the non-contiguous TIF. Right? And so we've put a significant amount of money on the table for developers, and you can get a higher amount if you can demonstrate that you are going to be able to sell, depending on which AMI you're able to sell to, right? So if you are able to sell to a buyer that's at 50% area median income, right? So if you sell to a buyer whose income is at the 50% rate, half of what the average is, or for the area, right? If you sell to that buyer, we will increase the amount of subsidy you can get so that you can still be made whole. Does that make sense? So that's the two main ways we're really trying to move forward right now, is aggregating where we can development for specific developers, and also offering subsidies so that they can increase, or we can incentivize homeownership, especially affordable homeownership.
Thank you. That's cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Yeah, two last questions. One is, Commissioner, you mentioned about the new round of block level planning. Is that, there's the first round that was done, I guess, based on the impact investment areas and the BVRC, and then the next round, how's that supposed to work? Are we doing block level plan? I mean, we're not finished with the other blocks, so how's that sequencing working?
Yeah, I mean, you have the different priority blocks that build off of each other. So if you remember, impact investment areas were then, created zones, and then within those zones where there were different blocks. So it works on kind of progressively looking at the blocks out of those zones so that we can, I'm thinking specifically of Broadway East in my mind on the map, where we have a zone 1 around Rutland, and then we have a zone 2 around Rayner Brown, and you're doing that block level planning, and then you're working to kind of meet in the middle and see where things are moving along.
So even though we're not finished with the first round, some of them, no,
Yeah,
we're not finished
you
with any
still
of
have
them.
to do the block level planning on a yearly basis and grow out, because some of the strategies, so for block level planning, one property may have 4 strategies.
Yeah.
And they're sequenced, and it depends on what those strategies are. And if there is stabilization or demolition that comes into play, that might be happening, sooner on the list, while there still is work happening on a fiscal
Yeah.
year 25, block that is still undergoing, condemnation proceedings on a property, but then we're able on a fiscal year 27 block to do, some of the demolitions that need to happen on that block.
So in the last hearing, we had, this chart that had the neighborhoods and then, which ones. So this would be sort of like A, and then there'll be another set that would be like B, but then they'll be playing into
And
each
there's
other.
actually, there would be this set that we're working on is kind of really
It's the
set
third,
3.
right. So can we get that at our next meeting, is like these 3,
I don't think we'll be completed by the next meeting.
to have all 3
Correct.
rounds completed?
Correct.
How about, I think this was just the second round. Because I think it's helpful for colleagues to also see like where all the
Yeah.
emphasis is
It's a several month process. We typically wouldn't finish out that block level planning really until May, June time period, June-ish.
Oh, okay. Well, we
July.
can have it for the next one. I'm not sure what our cadence is these days, but, sometime
Yeah,
within the next 6 months, I would say.
Probably.
Okay. Tony, do you have is this chart? You know what I'm talking about? This one? Okay, great. Thank you. And then my last question is, can you tell us the status of the comprehensive housing plan? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Chair,
yeah.
go ahead.
That is one, we've been actually working with Deputy Mayor Young on that and looking at a couple of different things in terms of preparation for that, when that would be going out for public comment. So I would need to get back to you on what the updated timeline is.
Can you get back to us in a couple of weeks? I see the deputy mayor is behind you.
Yeah, so it would be probably about 3 weeks.
That you can give us an update on the timeline? Okay. Tony, do you have that as well? Okay. Thank you.
I just want to be clear, a timeline for the process. A timeline for telling us, no. A timeline for telling us the exact outreach for the plan, because I think this is my 3rd budget cycle for this.
I know, that's exactly right.
And we pay consultants to help draft said plan, if I remember. So I just want to know where we are.
I can tell you overall, we've done several town hall meetings and several focus group meetings and had the advisory board that was meeting as part of kind of getting prepared for a draft that would be an additional round of engagement for public comment. So that part, I can tell you that we have done a number of different events and outreach on different pieces of it, and then now we're moving into the next phase.
Trust but verify. Can you provide evidence of said meetings slash other things that have happened? I just want to be clear because we paid I remember it was a large amount of money for a consultant to do the strategy for us and everything. And this is the third budget cycle that we've gone through and we haven't gotten it. And we've released legislation that impacts us. And then I'm also just put the administration on notice is understanding that we should have gone through comprehensive zoning again because of Transform Baltimore. And I think that we need this plan in place so we can have those conversations, be more informed and intentional moving forward, and then compare it to our master plan too. Just an FYI, I get the level that we need to like vet plans and things, but comprehensively, I still feel that some things are a little disjointed. And this is something that we've been waiting for, and I would love to see a draft before we even go into budget season, because that impacts a large portion of my district. I don't want residents to feel like they came to talk about this thing and it never happened. And then I'm still having issues with what planning put out there on the street too. But I just want to make sure that we are having that conversation. Any other questions, colleagues? We're in adjournment.